really, really happy to learn that the municipality of Tokyo, there's actually a big region in Japan, was among the first one in Japan to start issuing partnership certificates to LGBTQ plus couples, homosexual couples in general. So that's a massive novelty, because Japan is the only G7 countries, if I'm not mistaken, that still does not recognize same-sex unions. And as a consequence, it's been internationally recognized as very backward, and things have to change because Japan is advanced on many other issues, but on this one is still very traditional and conservative. So there's been a long fight for rights. They said it had a lot of setback because last year, for example, the Supreme Court ruled that constitutionally same-sex unions are still unconstitutional, so there's going to be a lot of work to do there. But Tokyo and a few other cities and regions decided to move ahead and start issuing these certificates. They give some rights at least to same-sex couples. So, for example, in terms of health, in terms of pension, still no rights, for example, to adoption. So there is a lot to do on this topic. But I was very happy to see that even in a conservative country like Japan, things are changing. And what inspired me to bring it to this live is that a good news there is not only a good news in Japan, but we know that actually the fight for rights, the fight for human rights and fundamental rights is global, because whenever there is a win somewhere, we are more likely to tip the balance elsewhere. And wherever there is a defeat, sadly, somewhere, we also have risk of having defeats elsewhere. What do you think, Colombe? You're the big expert on rights.
No, on the second bit, I agree. And I think we've seen it with women's rights being cracked down upon from Poland to the US. We see that it impacts it. I didn't see this news this morning, so I'm very happy you're bringing it. And I'm sharing in the chat here a link to it as well as a quote. And I see that Tokyo is the 9th prefecture to fully implement a partnership system, which is really cool because I think it actually introduced another topic that is the glocal one. So it's a global identity, a global system, but with local realities and local actions. And here we see that the national level, Japan is completely failing to act on LGBTIQ plus rights. And as a result, municipalities are taking it upon themselves to work in order to give same-sex couples the same rights and to be treated the same way as heterosexual couples. And I think that's really cool because, if you have one level of governance failing, it doesn't mean the others have to. Absolutely. And if suddenly you have the local level being like, look, we're going to act in a way that actually protects the rights of people living in our city. And we saw it in the US, for example, with some, I can't find the word.
Yeah, the city giving safe haven
cities for dreamers and migrants. And we see it in a lot of places where cities are taking it upon themselves to act and actually be more global in a way, be more advanced, be more progressive on different topics, whether it's migration or also on rights, than the national level. And as you said, it influences others. It also shows in a lot of places on earth where you don't have the right to marry your partner, where you don't have the same housing rights, where you don't have the same health or child-caring rights if you are a same-sex couple. It shows in countries that don't uphold those rights that the cities can try to act, that the cities can offer protections and can show that, as dumb as it sounds like, the world is not going to fall apart if suddenly people have rights, right? And that there's a way forward. And it's really cool to see it can come from the global level if everyone came together and were like, well, LGBTIQ plus rights are fundamental, they need to be protected across the world, and they do. But it can also come from the local level. And maybe, Tokyo, it's happening right now. Maybe it's a city outside of Japan next that is inspired by the best practice of Tokyo. And, reaches to Tokyo's mayors and is like, hey, how did you do it? Let's implement this here as well.
And this also gives me hope, not only for the local topic, which I fully agree with, but it's also because it shows how layer governments can, so from downward up, try to bring a change. But if you think about it, it's also the other way. So, for example, if we were to set up a global country, a global institution where people are citizens from all over the planet and where we manage to pass very progressive policies, for example, in terms of rights, then you have maybe a lot of people living in Japan that have voted to approve same-sex unions in this global institution, and so expect Japan to do the same. And so it will create a pressure from above on Japan to change its standard.
And maybe this global institution, and let's actually explain what we mean in a second, but maybe this global institution could actually issue same-sex marriage certificates
Absolutely.
to people living in Japan, even though Japan is not doing it.
Exactly. So it's a bit like the federal level in the US when they manage to do things.
By the way, by this global institution, just to recap for newcomers, at Atlas, we're working to build a democratic global governance. That's a mouthful. It sounds super boring. It's not, I promise. That's why we brand the show as How to Build a Country and not How to Build a Democratic Global Governance. The idea is we need to come together across borders. We need a system of governance where all of the citizens of the world can vote, decide what type of democracy they want, how they want to be represented, and actually decide on global topics such as right, but also climate, resources, etc. together. And it gave me the idea that maybe, I'll propose this to the global governance system we will create on the long term, that one of the first topics should be to issue partnership certificates or marriage certificates or whatever you want to call it in countries where some couples do not have the right to receive it.
So at least they feel, that the international community or part of the international community stands with them and for them.
And
it is a great idea.
I sent an article in the chat, but I think I just wanted to read this quote from someone who's called Fumino Sugiyama, who's a transgender activist and representative of Partnership Act for Tokyo. Not related to what I just said, but I just thought it was relevant. As a 41-year-old sexual minority and Tokyo resident, it's a joy to have my presence finally acknowledged practically for the first time. And I think this is when coming together and actually recognizing others means a lot.
And also, you see, it's non-legally binding, interestingly. So it's a kind of the same concept, no? There's written here that it's non-legally binding, but basically it's a proof that you're a couple and so you can get healthcare and so on. So in a way, we could do the same. We could actually issue a certificate and